Whether it's pulling for a character, pulling for a weapon, or something for another character, people have issues with it. And I'm someone who's done both. I pulled for a lot of weapons, I pulled for a lot of characters, and in equal parts have I played a lot of gacha. From Arknights to Genshin, Star Rail to Blue Archive, Nikkei to Epic 7, I've played a lot, and I pulled a lot. Realistically, I pulled far more than the vast majority of individuals, and I built an entire channel regarding these types of games. But one of the common sentiments you will hear if you do play gacha games, and that talk to other individuals who maybe don't play gacha, is that gacha games inherently are either just gambling systems, which to a degree, yes, can be true. But at the same time, you also hear the sentiment that it's not necessarily a real game, or at least doesn't deserve to be appreciated and viewed as such. And so, in today's video, as someone who only got into gacha games because of Genshin Impact, I want to talk about that, and if it's accurate. Because previously, I used to play a variety of games, many and all of which were not gacha oriented. And now look at me. First off, I want to make it clear, I don't think this is true. I think gacha games hold a very unique position, but I also understand where it's coming from. A lot of people associate gacha games with mobile games, and as such they view them as low quality, and this can be true, but the same can be said for any full-priced game. You can pay $30 for a game and get an absolutely awful one. At the same time, you can pay $70 for a game and have it be in non-functioning condition. There's a vast variety in games, both gacha and non, that vary in terms of not only the performance, but also the effort that was put into it. And so a game being gacha doesn't necessarily regulate it to essentially trash. But people view it as such, because for a while the vast majority of people only played stuff that was either a game with microtransactions in it, or a gacha game that was of low quality. We didn't until recently see an uptick in the quality of them, and more recently, I suppose, for the vast majority of the North American audience, or global audience, most of the better gacha games were still limited to the JP spectrum for a while. It's why games like Genshin Impact became so popular, because it was the first largely exposed and mainstream gacha for a lot of people, myself included. Now, once again, this doesn't inherently mean any of the games are bad, and I'm showing Genshin Impact here just because it's something nice to look at in the background, not because it's the only good gacha game. You even have games like Arknights or Blue Archive, which tell wonderful stories or have wonderful gameplay mechanics and systems that you can really delve into. A game being gacha doesn't necessarily make the gacha or the game itself bad. You can have generous gacha systems which give people a lot of resources. An example could be something like Azure Lane, which has an immense amount of characters, a large roster, and a pretty generous gacha system compared to others. You can have games that, even though they have gacha, don't necessarily have that gacha impact the gameplay itself. You can have hours and hours of content itself, and the gacha system only affects the characters you apply and pull for, not necessarily the amount of content you can access. This differs incredibly so from the games that either offer DLC that you have to purchase separately, especially if that DLC is very small and they offer numerous packs of it, or games that realistically are like gacha, because a lot of the content that you need to access can be taken away at any time. An example of this could be Destiny 2, one of, in my opinion, the worst microtransaction monetization systems that we currently have, and that isn't even a gacha game. Content is pretty seasonally and pretty consistently sunset, which makes it no longer accessible, and then it's reskinned and resold later on in multiple instances. In regards to weapons, you have the battle pass system, which many games do have, but you also have an entire microtransaction store which prioritizes and has the vast majority of cosmetics in the game. These cosmetics can range from extremely unique, which the base game does not have, or these cosmetics can range from just nice stuff like Fortnite collaborations or PlayStation collaborations. A lot of people like to compare the aspects of games like Genshin or Blue Archive and stuff like that to these DLC monetization practices, but the issue I want to prioritize is, even though events come and they do go eventually, none of these events are things you actively pay for. You pay for a character if you are a whale or a light spender, or you save up if you're free to play for a character, for constellations, for their weapons. You invest into them, and regardless of how you do it or how you choose to do it, these characters aren't taken away. Similar to an MMO though, those characters can all disappear once the servers shut down, but that's a risk you take with the vast majority of games, especially online only ones. And so that is a moot point in my opinion. Yes, in most gachas, there is either a battle pass system or a login system, example being the Welkin Moon in Genshin. And even still, there is a shop. You can get the outfits for these characters if you legitimately want to and like them. But the main meat of the game itself, in Genshin's case, it's the entirety of the map, it is all the story quests. It is the main quest, it is the additional character quests that you can access over time, the hangouts. All of these are accessible regardless as to whether or not you have the character. I can play Ito's story quest, even though on my account itself, I do not have Ito. Not at all. I don't intend on getting him, but I can still access his story quest. I'm not locked out of content because I don't have him. Arguably, the biggest form of content the game will kick you out of if you don't necessarily meet its requirements is the Spiral Abyss. But for the vast majority of people, you can get at least close to maximum amount of stars, which still doesn't lock you out of any gameplay. And so, contrary to that, you don't have to spend a dime and can still access the entirety of the game itself. Whether it is some of the better story quests and characters, whether it's entirely new regions that come out, or maybe you just find one design you really like. It doesn't matter. You can be pulled into the extremely long list of lore into the game and fall in love with characters. You can play through the main story quest and actually care about what happens next. You can care about one specific region, or maybe one specific character and focus solely on them. As one individual here pointed out, they're fun and accessible. Yes, in some categories they are mobile games. As one individual here points out, yes, they're fun and accessible. Because they're mobile games, you can play them essentially anywhere. You don't need a PC, you don't need a PlayStation, you can play them on your phone, on your tablet, it doesn't matter. Let's collect collectathons. You can collect a lot of things. Animalculus and Genshin, you can collect characters, you can collect different sets, different light cones, relics, whatever the case may be. You can collect the individuals you legitimately like and invest into them. And the gameplay is so wide, from the tower defensive Arknights to the third-person exploration Breath of the Wild-esque gameplay of something like Genshin Impact, to the turn-based category of Honkai Star Rail, or the Blue Archive where you're auto-battling whilst only utilizing skills. With chibis. There's card-based systems. There's such a unique and wide variety of gameplay that you're bound to find one that you legitimately enjoy. And in comparison to modern standard games with Battle Pass or microtransaction-based systems, they may be better for you. A gacha game doesn't necessarily need you to rely on stuff or pay to get characters or to get new skins or new items. You're not paying for any of the content, so realistically, if you choose to, you can drop the game at any time. And even for the cases of games like Arknights, Blue Archive, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, these games have been out for a long time and are getting consistent updates. Genshin even has graphical updates and new region expansions, of which there are a lot of cases in games that you find where you may find that one game is released and 2 to 3 years later the support for it may be dropped. It may receive patches, or it may not. Gacha games, since they rely on you consistently playing them and coming back to them, do have the ability to earn more over time because they are consistently updating the game, consistently adding characters for you to pay for you to get, for you to roll for, and their free use and accessibility means that a vast majority of people can access them and potentially play. Don't get me wrong, you can play a gacha game simply because you simp for one character, and I do believe a lot of people do that. For instance, I simp for Silverwolf and Rojo, as well as Lynx and a variety of other units like Bailu. But at the same time, you can also play because you legitimately fell in love with the story, the characters, their relations, such as Yanqing to somebody like Jing Yuan. You can like the gameplay of characters like QQ or Mbabra Lunai. These are individuals who you can legitimately care for and be interested and invested into. Whilst the stories don't have to be the reason you play, they could be part of it. You could enjoy the worlds. And yes, some may have auto battle systems, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the gameplay, nor does it make the game bad itself. It's not like you're just watching it all the time. You can legitimately choose to play. It's up to you. And I believe one of the primary issues is people will look at it and judge gacha games separately, saying that they are either gambling systems, gacha systems, or essentially money pit holes. But the problem is, if you're comparing that, you also need to consider how most AAA games perform. Whether that be you buy the base game, then you buy all the DLC and expansions. And if it's an MMO, you buy the base game with a subscription model, maybe something like Final Fantasy. Or maybe it's Destiny 2, as we mentioned previously. Maybe you play games and you consistently have to move upwards. This could be in the form of buying DLC. This could be in the form of buying a battle pass or a monthly card. Call of Duty and Fortnite both have battle pass oriented systems, as does Destiny. And so the equivalent to spending in a gacha game is the same in those varieties. Because whilst you do have a free game at its core, in at least a gacha, those games, Destiny in comparison, you have a free game with most of the content locked off behind stuff you have to pay for. Whether that be a battle pass or expansion packs. Just as you could judge a game entirely differently for the monetization it has, it doesn't inherently make the game itself bad by virtue of having monetization, which is something I legitimately think a lot of people need to understand before they look at a gacha game and immediately write it off as undeserving of either the praise it gets or the amount of money it gets. Yes, gachas make a lot of money, but They are legitimately good games in a lot of scenarios. And considering how much more recently AAA games have been geared towards earning money, and considering how much more recently AAA games have been geared towards earning money and monetization increasing their current practices, it makes sense to view a gacha game as a legitimate game, especially if it's offering you a good experience. But that is just mine. Tell me yours down below. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.